Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Do the police really use psychics to solve cold cases? Has a psychic ever testified at a murder trial? What kind of emotional experience must it be to, quote, see and hear crimes? Hi, folks, and Happy New Year again. Welcome to the 99th broadcast of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Paul, and I'm afraid I'm flying solo today. Ben is not with us. I'm afraid it's my fault. I kept him going till about 2:30 this morning, and again, he's a delicate soul. You'd think I was the one who was 40 years younger. Anyway, he promises he'll be back with us next week and on CBS tomorrow night, and he says that he did give me a few questions for our guest today. But before we introduce our guest, it's contest time. Ryan from Dudley, Massachusetts won last week's contest. The question was, what famous lake monster lives in the deserts of the state of Utah? Odd question, but the answer was the Bear Lake Monster. First reported by the local natives, this huge serpent-like creature with a horse-like head and flippers, supposedly, was reported as recently as 2002. This week's question is, and this is a tough one, where in Kansas did people report phantom Civil War soldiers firing into a creek in 2007? The soldiers disappeared when approached. That is a tough one. However, if you can handle that, call us locally, 401-766-1240, or from anywhere in the U.S. at 800-449-1240. And those, of course, are our call-in numbers today. If we don't announce a winner during the show and you still think you can get it, drop a line to Ben at behindtheparanormal.com. The winner gets a copy of Gift of the White Light by today's guest. Annette Martin discovered her psychic gifts at the age of 7 when she had a vision of being attacked by playmates, something that occurred shortly thereafter. I don't know what kind of friends she had. These abilities apparently ran in her family, which accepted her gifts willingly. By the time she was 14, she was on the radio as a psychic and began building a career counseling corporate as well as private clients. As a police psychic, she has worked with over 60 law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, to solve homicides, find missing people, and bring cold cases to closure. She is also a medical intuitive and healer who has convinced thousands of doctors of her authenticity, and a paranormal investigator who works with the famous author and parapsychologist Lloyd Orbach. Known as the psychic who can do it all, she certainly is a paranormal renaissance woman. Annette has appeared on TV and radio. I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth with the producer here about something I don't understand. Annette has appeared on TV and radio around the world, including Good Morning America and the BBC. She holds a degree in psychology and is founder of the Institute of Intuitive Research in Campbell, California. And if we keep going, we'll never talk to her. And this is her first appearance on our show, and we're very pleased to have her. Her website, www.annette-martin.com. Okay. Annette Martin, welcome to Behind the Paranormal. Oh, we got her here?
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, we're having a little trouble here.
We'll get nothing compared with last Sunday night. Let's not talk about government cover-ups. Okay, very good. Well, it's really good to have you, Annette, at last.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's lovely to be on your show.
Took a while to get you, but you're here today, and that's what matters. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, too.
Well, my son and right-hand man is not with us, I'm afraid, today. As you heard, I kind of kept him going kind of late.
I did.
But he did leave a few questions that we wanted to start off with. And then we'll start with the basics, okay, and then we'll start going a little deeper. When you started having visions as a child, did you feel comfortable with it, or were you scared?
Well, actually, I was very comfortable with it because it happened so quickly at 7 years old. I was walking down the street, on Market Street in San Francisco, and this woman walked by my mother and I saw inside of her stomach. and I saw all these little black bugs crawling around in her stomach.
Oh, dear.
And, yes, and as a child, you just, when you see something, you see it, and then you tell people what you see. And so, naturally, I turned to my mother, and I said to my mother, Mommy, you see that lady over there? She's got all those black bugs in her tummy. You have to tell her she's got to go see her doctor. Well, you can imagine what my mother thought.
Yeah.
And she just said, what? And I repeated myself, of course. And she looked at me and she said, oh, Annette, I'm sure she will. I'm sure she'll go to the doctor, just thinking that I was crazy, of course. And that was the very first thing that I ever saw. And then it just continued on from there. The second time was more of a vision. When a friend of my mother's had come over for lunch, and she left, and about an hour or so afterwards, I ran out into the kitchen and said to my mother, Mommy, you need to call Pauline and tell her that her big right toe really, really hurts, and she's got to go and see the doctor. My mother looked at me and said, what? I said, yes, her big right toe really, really hurts, and she's got to go see the doctor. My mother said, if anything was wrong with Pauline, she would have told me, because she tells me everything that is wrong with her. But I continued on with my story, and my mother said, okay, I'll call her tomorrow morning. Well, the next morning came around, and guess what? The telephone rang, and who was it but Pauline? Pauline says to my mother, Viola, you won't believe what happened to me after I left your house yesterday. Last night I was in bed, and all of a sudden my big right toe began to swell and hurt. I was in excruciating pain all night long. I just came back from the podiatrist, and he had to take the nail off of my big right toe. And he said, Mrs. Moses, it's a good thing you came in, because this was terribly, terribly infected and could have been much worse than what we had to do today.
So you started out pretty much as a junior medical intuitive.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
That is exactly how I started.
Okay. All right. And Ben has another question here. How did you get guidance and training to develop these abilities?
Oh, very good question. Actually, I had no guidance, and I had no training. Everything what has happened for me is that I've sort of had to listen and learn as I went along, because I was really being trained by my guide, whose name I discovered is Cama, C-A-M-A. And he's been with me from the very beginning.
Okay.
And he is the one who has actually told me, do this, do that, do this, do that.
Okay. Now, I hear this all the time, of course, and the next series of questions, of course, has to do kind of with that, because this is where I start getting a little nervous. My own background, 40 years of investigating the paranormal. My background is essentially, a lot of work in the field, but very academic and kind of with a more scholarly approach. And Ben is more like yourself. He's very intuitive, and we've in the past few years developed a system where we kind of really balance each other out and works rather well. You kind of remind me of him, as a matter of fact, from what you said. But when we start having spirits, okay, and I'm not sure I believe in the classical spiritualist interpretation of spirits. I'm more of the kind of, I'm a voice crying in the wilderness in this field, that we're dealing with, physical beings and physical worlds and people who have not died there but have here, and all, things like, what I'm saying, the multiverse idea, as opposed to the 19th century kind of thing. Which again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe the spiritualists are right. I don't know. So we're open-minded, of course, on this show. But I just leading up to the question, how did you know that what you were being told by this guide was true? I mean, how did you test it, or how did you determine? I mean, again, I don't believe half the people I meet on the street, never mind some entity somewhere, and I've learned to kind of consider every quote-unquote ghost guilty until proven innocent.
Right, of
maybe
course.
Maybe it's a guy thing, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you respond? I mean, how do you test? How do you decide whether what you're being told is true?
Let me tell you what happened. It is at age 7, and how everything really started was because of my guide, Kama. I was playing with children that I had known all my life, and we were playing kick the can. And while we were playing, all of a sudden I looked up in the sky and I saw this vision. And this vision was the children that I was playing with were stoning me to death with rocks and sticks. And I looked at that and went, what? What is that? How can that possibly be? Because all of these children were my friends, and we've been friends for 7 years, as long as I'd been alive. And I just dismissed it. Well, within 10 minutes, my vision became a reality. And the children did start to throw rocks and sticks at me for absolutely no provocation. Well, I began to run, and I ran up my stairs, totally forgetting that my mommy and daddy were at work. And I started pounding on the door. The children were still throwing the rocks and sticks at me. I was bleeding. I turned around and faced the children. I was just in shock, absolute shock. And all of a sudden, I heard this male voice say to me, "Pick up that stick," very loudly. And I turned around thinking, of course, that it was my daddy, and there was no one there. And I turned back to the children again, and the voice again said, "Pick up that stick and throw it." Well, I looked down at my right foot, and there was a stick about 13 inches long. And as I looked at that stick, I knew that if I listened to the voice and threw the stick, I would be okay. If I did not listen to the voice, I was going to be dead, for sure. And so I picked up the stick and I threw it. And I hit one of the little boys straight across the nose, broke his nose, blood went everywhere. And the ambulance came and took him away. And so to make a long story very short, that is the circumstance that occurred for me. And so what I felt was that this masculine voice had literally saved my life. And so naturally, being, again, a 7-year-old child, I put a great deal of faith into that voice. And he would speak to me many different times, and of course then I began to see him later on. And he has literally saved my life probably about 10 times.
That's, well, obviously, I certainly give the benefit of the doubt, but obviously other questions arise, and I don't want to dwell on this because I wanted to get into the psychic crime detection, things like that, but I can't help but wonder, that doesn't sound like a very auspicious beginning from a positive sense. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Why would the children have just turned on you like that? Had that ever happened before?
It had never happened before. And actually, the fourth day after this occurred, when the little boy with the broken nose came over with a bandage all over his face, he came over and asked me, he and my little girlfriend who I was playing with, if we would like to come over and play on his swing set. Like nothing had ever happened. And we did, because, of course, we were only 7 years old, and he was the only one who had a swing set in his backyard. So we went over there and we played and had a wonderful time. And life went on as if nothing had ever happened.
See, that sounds like parasite activity to me. Push buttons, get a reaction, win somebody's confidence. All right, well, I'll leave that for now. Okay, we want to have you back lots of times because I can already tell you, are a great guest. But let's move on to some of the other questions we had, because unfortunately this hour really goes by pretty fast.
Very fast,
yeah.
Yes.
When did you start seeing the answers to crimes as opposed to just people's medical problems, missing people, that sort of thing? When did that begin to manifest in your life?
Well, that was very interesting because that was quite a few years later. Actually, in 1975, I was already a professional psychic, and I was also a professional opera singer. And
wow. Talk about a Renaissance person.
Yes. And so Life was very exciting for me. My husband, my children, and I had just returned from living abroad for 5 years. We've been in Hong Kong and Mexico. We set up a lovely home in Novato, California, and I had a secretary, and one day she said, I think that we should take a yoga class. And I said, oh, that's a wonderful idea. Let's do that. And so we did. And during one of the classes in the meditation, we were laying on the floor, and as I was laying there breathing and going into a lovely meditation, all of a sudden a body was hanging out over my body on the floor. Can you imagine?
No.
And a street sign was next to this body. It was definitely female. It was a little fatter than it should have been, and I knew right away that it was dead. And it scared the living daylights out of me. I sat straight up off the floor.
Yeah, that had to be nerve-wracking.
It was very. And my secretary, sat up and said, what's wrong? And I said, oh, my gosh, it's okay. It's okay. And so we laid back down again, but the body never went away. It stayed during the rest of the meditation.
And nobody else saw this?
Oh, of course not.
Yeah.
No. And so the teacher and my secretary came over to me after the class and said, what happened? I told them, and they both said simultaneously, Annette, you have to go down to the Marin Sheriff's office and tell them what you've seen. And I looked at both of them and I said, what? Are you kidding me? You're going to think I'm crazy. I'm a professional psychic, and they're going to totally think I'm nuts.
Even in California?
Yeah. Yes. Well, it took about 15 minutes or so, plus a phone call to my husband who said, well, why not? Why don't you go down there? You may have seen something. He was very open to what I did, and so that was wonderful. Well, we did. So we went down to the Marin Sheriff's office and walked in, and I walked up to the desk, and the sergeant was there, and he said, can I help you? And I said, yes, my name is Annette Martin. I'm a professional psychic, and I've seen a dead body. Well, Paul, you should have seen his face. He was like, what? His eyes are huge. Wait, just a moment. And he runs back into these other offices, and a couple minutes later, 2 officers come out and escort us into a room that is like an interrogation room. There are no windows, and there's a desk and 3 chairs, and we sit down and wait, and 2 other detectives come in and sit down, and this one detective, whose name was Detective Richard Keaton, he sits down and he says, can I help you? And I looked at him and I said, well, yes, my name is Annette Martin. I'm a professional psychic, and you're going to think I'm crazy. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, no, I won't think you're crazy, Annette. Tell me, what did you experience? Well, it was immediate, Paul. I knew right away that I could trust this man. And I began to tell him what I saw, and he went out and he got a photograph and he got some articles, and for the next 4 hours I sat there giving him information. They asked me to come back that that evening because the captain wanted to talk to me and a few of the detectives. Well, I came back and walked into a room of 35 people. There was a judge, there was a district attorney, there were 3 FBI men.
And this is your first time out.
A detective.
Yeah.
And we did another 4 more hours.
My goodness.
And I gave them even more information, very specific about this particular case. I told them all about the assailant. I told them all about the victim. I used a map. I traced the suspect's flight. I told them that he would try to murder again, that he had murdered before. I also said that they would find him exactly a year to that day, and that they would find him working in an institutional setting like a hospital, and that he would be wearing white, and it would not be in California. Well, time went on, and 1 year to the exact date, I got a phone call from Detective Sergeant Richard Keaton, and he says to me, Annette, are you sitting down? Well, you know, Paul, when anybody ever says that to me, I know, something really big is coming. And he says, we have found our suspect. He tried to kill another girl. He thought he had buried her and she was dead, but she wasn't. And she climbed out of the grave and got to a road and got to the police department. They found him working in a hospital wearing white and in the state of Washington.
Wow. That's ironic, not to say amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And that was your first time out?
That was my first time out.
Wow.
And I could not believe it, because I said to him, you are kidding me, aren't you? You're just razzing me. And he goes, oh, no. This is the truth.
So you were rather surprised that you had been successful.
I was shocked.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I was absolutely shocked.
All right.
Because when I saw everything, Paul, everything was so vivid in total color. When I perceive things, I perceive taste and smell and feeling. All of my senses are working all at the same time.
Yeah.
But this very first case was just like I was right there, watching the murder, watching everything. It was just incredible.
I've been so fascinated you haven't given our numbers. It's 401-766-1240 locally if you'd like to talk with Annette Martin today, renowned psychic from California. That's in the local listening area, 800-449-1240 from anywhere in the USA. And again, we're talking with Annette Martin, a police psychic, a Renaissance person in the psychic realm, certainly, medical intuitive, author, teacher. And okay, let's. I wanted to continue into this vein of the police psychic's work, but we're going to take a short commercial break here, and we'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal on onworldwide.com and 1240 a.m. here in the beautiful Blackstone Valley.
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
Okay, we're back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm afraid Ben's not with us today because I wore him out. And it's just me, and we're here with the psychic Annette Martin here on ON 1240 AM and onworldwide.com. And we're talking about going a little deeper into the realm of psychic crime solving. Now, Annette, when you have a crime experience, psychically speaking, do the police come to you? Do you go to them? Or does it vary, or how does it work generally? It
actually varies. Well, after I did this very first case with the Marin Sheriff's Office, what happened was really kind of funny, because different agencies began to hear about it. And they started calling Detective Richard Keaton and saying, hey, Rich, I hear that you've got this woo-woo lady out there in California and who helps with the police cases, and we've got this case, and do you think that she could help us? And it sort of started out like that, and they began calling him, and before we knew it, Richard and I were doing these cases all over the country.
How many have you worked on altogether, or do you keep count?
Well, sort of. Yeah. There's over 70 cases that I've worked on.
Now, you were the first psychic ever called to testify in a murder trial as an expert witness. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true.
What was that about?
Yes. Well, what happened there was the woman who was on trial for murder, she herself is very intuitive. And so the lawyer called me up and asked me if I would come and be an expert witness on the case and would come in and talk about being a psychic detective, which I said, well, you know, do you realize that I would be the very first psychic to come in as an expert witness? And she says, yes, I do. And I said, well, terrific. Okay, yeah, I will do this. And so I went to the courthouse, and I'm sitting out waiting in the hallway, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and finally she came out, and she said, oh, Annette, oh, my gosh. She said, you will not believe what's going on in the courtroom. I said, what? She said, well, the district attorney, who is, of course, against her client, and the judge are arguing about whether you're going to be able to come in and testify. Well, they spent several hours discussing this, and finally they brought in another judge, a gentleman, who said, well, why not? You know, all she's going to do is say what she does. What are you guys getting all upset about?
Yeah, it's up to the jury to decide on the validity.
Yeah, right. So I did. So I went in, and I just was able to talk about what I did. And it was quite an experience because that had been, of course, the very first time I'd even ever been in a court. And so I spoke directly to the jury and told them all the different things that I did and how many cases and the process that I used. And all of their eyes were just all on me and just like, whoa, you know.
Now, where was this again?
This was over in Martinez, California.
Okay. And when? What year?
This was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that's amazing. And so do you feel that your testimony influenced the verdict?
Well, actually, no, they convicted her.
Oh, okay.
They did convict her.
Well, hey, you tried. All right. All right. What have you done with the FBI? Now, let me rephrase that. It makes it sound like you misplaced them. What work have you done for the FBI, if I may ask that?
Yes, well, of course, the FBI were involved in this very first case that I was involved in.
Okay, yeah.
And so they were very instrumental in following up on tracking this guy, which I had given them all kinds of information, different places where he would be, and they would miss him in about 15 minutes to a half an hour. There were 3 different places that they could have apprehended him, but they missed him. And so that was the very first time with FBI. And then after that, the FBI asked me if I would do some work with them with the SLA in San Francisco. They were doing bombings with Patty Hearst, and also wanted to work with me with Patty Hearst, which I did. And so that was the second time. And then throughout the years, there have been very different cases that the FBI have called me and asked me to come and help them.
Okay.
Cases that I can't talk about.
Sure. No, I hear you. I know that probably there are a number of police psychics whom I know, several of whom have been interviewed on this show, and they cannot talk about certain things, particularly some work with the government in reference to terrorism,
right,
things of that kind. But that leads me into the question of finding missing people. You do that as well for the police, is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about one or two of those cases.
Finding missing people. Well, there was several of them that I have been on television. One in particular on court TV was a gentleman who had been missing for about 3 months. And the family asked the police department to contact me because they had heard about me. So the detective came down to my office, and I asked him to bring a photograph of the victim, the missing person, and maps, which he did. I told him where the person was. I told him that he was dead. I drew on the map exactly where he had walked from his apartment. He'd gone into this huge park. And the detective says to me, well, yes, this park is 2,000 acres, Annette. And I said, well, this is where he is. And I drew on the map exactly where the body was. So he left, of course, thinking, that I was crazy. And went back and he told the captain, and the captain said, well, you can go out tomorrow morning and look for him. Well, in the meantime, a gal who is a search and rescue gal with a dog came into the office and said, well, what did the psychic say? And the detective says, well, this is what she told me, and he throws the map down on the table, and she goes, oh, I know exactly where that is. Come on, let's go. And he said, well, no, the captain said I can't go until tomorrow. Well, what did she do? She left. She knew exactly where it was and made a copy of the map and went with another search and rescue person and her dog. And they followed my map, and guess what? The body was exactly I had drawn this little circle, and the body was exactly right in the middle of the circle where I said it was.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't this get depressing at times?
No, actually it doesn't, because one of the things that happens to me, Paul, is that when the police come to me or a family member calls me and says that someone is missing, I get very upset and I get very angry to think that someone else could take the life of somebody else. That makes me very angry, and so my adrenaline really gets going because I feel that's wrong.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You cannot murder somebody. I mean, you cannot take someone's life. That is not your choice.
Right.
And so I always go with that thought in mind. And when, even if there has not been foul play, and of course the police do not know always whether there's been foul play or not, even just finding someone to help bring closure to the family, for me, is the most important thing.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next, was, you really are a psychic, do you have contact with the families, both during the investigation and in an attempt to make closure? And the reason I ask is sometimes the police get a little antsy about that.
I do not. The process that I use is if the family calls me, I explain to them that I only work directly with the police department.
Okay.
And that I will do the sessions for the police department. We will record that. They will have the copy of that. If the detective chooses to tell the family what I have said, then that is his prerogative. But I will not give that information to the family because, and of course the families always say, well, why not? You know, we want to find out. And I go, well, you know, it's quite possible that maybe someone in your family or a very close friend is involved with your loved one who is missing. And then they always say, oh, yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah. It's amazing how people never think of that.
Oh, it's true, especially when their emotions are in the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can you... I'm sorry? No, I'm just saying, can you tell us about a case or two that had a happy ending in the sense of a missing person, say?
Yes, there is one case that was a very, very happy ending, and it was a young man who had been missing from Los Altos, California, when I had my office there. The parents had come in to see me, and I, excuse me, I had them come into my office and sit down, and they explained to me that their son was missing. He had been down in Florida with his cousin, and his cousin turned around, and their son was gone. Now, the son was about 19, 20 years old, and he was a little mentally retarded. So they were just beside themselves. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. And they had brought in a photograph of him. And I held the photograph and doing the process called psychometry, which is the process that I use when I'm working with people.
Which is looking at an object and reading kind of what its life has been like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whether it's an object or it's a photograph.
Right.
And in this case, it was a photograph. Excuse me. And so immediately I saw that the boy had gotten on a bus. And the bus was going to New York City. Well, the parents, of course, were just like, what? And I said, yes. And I don't see any suitcase. I don't see anything. I just see him getting on this bus and he doesn't have any money, and the bus driver lets him get on the bus. And they were just, astounded. Yeah. Well, I saw the bus going to New York City, and he got off, and then he was walking down the streets of New York City, totally lost. And then I saw coming towards him a group of about 4 males that looked like Hare Krishnas. And they came up to him, and they were talking with him, and then they took him to their house. They had a house. And I saw that they were taking very good care of him, but he had a medical problem, and they took him to a hospital. I gave him the name of the hospital, and the parents, of course, were just, oh, my God. And so as soon as the parents left, they called up a cousin of theirs who is a police officer in New York City and asked him to go over to the hospital. And sure enough, he was just a patrolman. He went over to the hospital, and the young boy had been there. And he had used the mom and dad's credit card, which he had with him. But they couldn't tell by his writing what address he was staying at. It was illegible. So they came back to me again. The parents came back to me again, and I said, no, this is where he's at. And I sat down, and I said, this is the address of the house, and I drew what the street looked like and what was on the street. And I said, please go right now and call the policeman and tell him to go to this address. Well, he did. He went to the address, knocked on the door, and who answers the door but the Hare Krishna? And he says, you have one of my relatives here, blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, yes, he is here. And he said, well, I want him to be released in my care. And they said, absolutely not. No, you cannot have him. We are taking care of him. And they would not release him. Oh, dear. So the parents came back again to me and said, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, well, this is what you have to do. You have to call the person who is in charge of the Hare Krishnas. And I see that he's in San Francisco, that there is an office there, and you need to call him and tell him about your son, that he's not well and that he needs care, he needs medication, and that you want him back. Well, they did. They called, and at first the gentleman said no, that he was part of the Hare Krishnas now. But finally, after 3 phone calls, he released him, and the parents went back and got him.
Okay.
And that was just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely an extraordinary case.
All right. Let me ask you this. In all these cases, whether they be missing persons or crimes, just limiting to that, how many times have you been wrong?
One time, I mistook the body that I found to be a body of somebody else.
Oh,
and that was incredible, because this time, this was a captain who came to see me. He was looking for a young girl who was missing. And I saw the body in this area, and I described it and said what town it was in and everything else. He drove there, and there was another police agency there, and the detective there says, oh, does this body belong to you? And they went and checked it out, and he said, no, but my gosh, it's the same M.O. as the girl that I had told him about. They could have been sisters. It was amazing.
Okay. All right, that is pretty amazing. But we've got a couple of emails here for you that came in before the show. But I wanted to just go back to this issue of the guide. Kama, you said his name?
Kama.
Okay. Who, according to your bio, is this the one who's from the, quote, Valley of the Gods, unquote?
Yes, that's right.
What is the Valley of the Gods?
The Valley of the Gods is... I thought it was a fictitious place, to tell you the truth, for years, until I found a friend who was going there, and she was going to be giving out books and pencils and pens, and she was going to be traveling up to that area. And she told me that she was going up to the Valley of the Gods, and it lies in the mountains near Tibet.
Oh, okay. Oh, I know. Yeah, I got you. Okay. I just, the light bulb just went on. Because, the reason I ask is because there are so many different guides from so many different places, and I have no problem with that, because in the multiverse perspective, there are all kinds of different worlds, all kinds of different people, and I really do believe after 40 years of doing this that there are far more beneficial forces out there than there are negative ones.
Mm-hmm.
But there are enough negative ones to make me nervous whenever, these things are happening. And and I look from the point of view as a father at my own son, who is incredibly sensitive, and we look very carefully at these things. Whenever any intuitive messages seem to be coming in. But again, there is contact, there is love, there are hands reaching across the boundaries of these worlds all the time, and so I have no problem with it. I just want to make sure who it really is. So
right. Well, I have another guide as well, which we haven't spoken about, and that's the very famous Mr. Edgar Cayce.
I was just going, again, here you go. I was just going to ask you about Edgar Cayce. Tell us about Edgar Cayce and how you contact with him.
Yes, well, obviously he had been with me all my life as well, which I was not aware of until he made himself very visible during the, I was between 1969 and 1970. And I was living in Hong Kong at the time, doing a reading for a client at their home. We had been invited over for dinner, my husband and I, and there was 4 of us were sitting there having dinner. And I started doing this reading for her when all of a sudden I felt this hand or something pressing down on my left shoulder. I had on one of those blouses during the late 60s that were kind of poofy. And the gal who was sitting across from me puts her hand up and she's pointing and she's saying, there's this mist around you, Annette, and your blouse is going down on your left shoulder. And she's just, can't even talk practically. And my husband is white. Her husband is white. And I'm going, I feel somebody is pressing down on my left shoulder. And I began to cry because it was just very frightening. And I thought, what is happening? What is going on? What is this? And finally, he spoke. And he told me, he said, I am Mr. Edgar Cayce, and I have come to help you with your medical reading. And I have been here for a very long time with you. Well, I was just beside myself because I really didn't know at that point who Edgar Cayce was. And she explained to me who he was, and it was just absolutely extraordinary. And the words just flew out of my mouth, and I did this incredible in-depth medical diagnosing on her, which turned out to be 100% when she went to the doctor a few days later.
Well, let me just explain. Edgar Cayce died, whatever that means, in 1945, and was known as the Sleeping Prophet. He, as I understand it, was from Virginia, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and he found that he, much like yourself, found abilities coming forth throughout his life, and he would had the habit of going to sleep, and then he would wake up. He would, while asleep, I believe, would issue all sorts of helpful advice to people and everything, all the way up through predictions of the politics or the future of whatever. And then he would wake up and not remember a thing, but he would really, according to people who've been on this show, he really helped them and their families a lot. So that's who Edgar Cayce was. Absolutely.
Well, he is with me every day that I do a reading, and he stands on my left side. And when I see him, he's got on this old black suit that's kind of wrinkled, and he has this hat on, a black hat that also looks kind of squashed down on the top, like he just got out of a coffin. He just looks so out of disrepair.
All right. Well, that's kind of, I guess, what he looked. But I'm just, I won't. The question, of course, I would always say, how do you know it really is Edgar Cayce? But I won't belabor that because we're running out of time. Well, that's pretty amazing. And let me get to a couple of these emails here that came in for you. They're questions that go beyond our discussion today. Pretty much people are interested in certain things here. This is from Chandra in Worcester, Massachusetts. And Chandra asks, and you don't have to answer this if you don't have these, but you do seem to be a Renaissance person, so I'll ask. And she wants to know, what are your predictions for 2012, and how can we get ready? I don't know if you even have any predictions for 2012, but this is just the question that came in.
Yeah, my feeling about 2012 is that it is not going to be the end of the world. My feeling is what is happening, and it's already begun, is that the consciousness in our whole society on Earth is changing, and that our consciousness will make a tremendous leap in the year 2012.
Okay,
And
so you see good things.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do, yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I see happening.
All right. Okay, well, that's could be worse. Okay. Here's a question about this year. This is from Cassie in Sarasota, Florida, who writes in now and then. I'd love to know Annette's predictions for 2010.
Well, I actually haven't done too many predictions for 2010.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't generally go out and put those out there.
Okay.
But
All right.
I can tell you one thing, is that I do feel that we are in for some very surprising changes this
Well,
year.
I hope we could use some good ones.
There are going to be some good ones. There are going to be some that people do not think are good, but will turn out to be good.
That's good. All right. And I should have warned you about this ahead of time, because this came to Ben and me. All right, and wasn't specifically directed at you, but if maybe you have some insight on this, I don't know. This is from Melissa Carter in Yorkville, Illinois, and Melissa writes in. I purchased a watch for my son's college graduation and had it engraved, magna cum laude. My son worked full-time while paying his way through school. It makes me sad every time I think of the watch being lost. Can you help us find it? I mean, I didn't know what to do. I mean, do you... I don't know if you even bother with things of that kind, but I feel sorry for Melissa here, and I thought I'd just ask.
Yes, I do that, but what I have to have is either a photograph of the watch and a photograph of the person who was wearing the watch.
Okay.
And they can call me at my office, and if they go to my website at www.annette, ANNETTE-Martin,
Okay.
MARTIN.com, they can find out how to get in touch with me.
Oh, great. So, well, can we put Melissa in touch with you, or?
Sure.
Okay, excellent. We'll do that. Okay, well, that's good. That'll help her out, because Ben lost his class ring from school,
no.
so we're still, somebody found it, and we can't. I know it's a mess. Anyway, I sympathize with anybody who's lost anything. Okay, what are you working on right now? What projects do you have going?
Yes. Well, the project today, I believe, is the 2nd, right, of January.
Mm-hmm.
This evening, a show that I did for the Biography Channel will be aired.
Oh, cool. Okay.
At 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
All right.
On Psychic Investigators.
Okay. Is
the name of the show.
Great.
I have just been named the International Paranormal Acknowledgement Award.
Mm-hmm.
I am a winner for the category of Best Female National Paranormal Investigator, which was an honor that I just received 2 days ago. And the newest thing that I'm working on is a book that we have just finished that I have written with Lloyd Arbach, who's a very famous parapsychologist, and my partner. We have written a book, a series of guidebooks for ghost places in different areas of California, and it's titled Have Ghosts Will Travel, San Francisco.
All right.
So the first book is going to be all about San Francisco and places that have ghosts, and this is going to be in the first person, our experiences and my conversations with the ghosts.
Interesting.
Because I talk to the ghosts and they talk to me. So I've been talking to ghosts also since I was a little girl. So this is something that we can talk about probably at another time.
Well, definitely, yeah. Because, Ben's a lot better at that than I am, because I'm so untrusting, I suppose. But nevertheless, my next book is What Ghosts Have to Say About God, what I've picked up over the last 40 years in that vein. So it sounds interesting. Okay, I wanted to ask you one thing that does seem to be on the minds of a lot of people when they listen to this show, because we question everything. We're open-minded and we welcome all opinions, but we do question a lot. How do people tell a good psychic from a bad psychic?
That's the question that's asked me very frequently, Paul. And first personally, what I always tell people is that the best thing to do is to get a recommendation from someone else who has gone to see the psychic. So if someone wants to come to see me, I have a lot of people. I don't do very much advertising because most of my clientele have been referred. And I feel that that is the best way to do it.
Okay.
And if you do get involved with another psychic who is asking you for a lot of money and telling you that, you have a curse on you, please go to your local police department and turn them in.
Okay. That's good advice. I don't know, when people have asked me that, the answer I generally light on is just a four-letter word, which is love. And I think you can tell if someone is full of love. I think it kind of glows. And that's the first thing I always kind of think of when it comes to whether someone is good or bad. Again, I'm very suspicious about all this, and I want to know what's really happening. And because things in the paranormal, in my experience, are never what they appear to be. But I always say love is a good sign in anything and anyone, that they are sincere, and it also repels the negative energy that we run into so often. When Ben and I end up working with a lot of non-human entities who are not nice, and and this is what we find. Love is pretty much the answer to everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's very true. But
Excellent.
I also would recommend that they find somebody who had been recommended to them.
Okay, yeah.
Who has a track record.
All right. And just briefly, we do have a minute or two here. Just briefly, now you also are a paranormal investigator. When did you start doing that, and how do you handle that?
Well,
25 words or less.
25 words or less.
Yeah.
I handle it very well, and the ghosts seem to like me very much. And it's like when they see me, it's like they say to themselves, "Oh, there's someone who can see me. There's someone who can hear me." And so they immediately begin to talk to me, if there is a ghost. And, of course, many places that we go into, there's residual haunting, which is
Yes, I don't believe in those.
Oh, you don't believe in those?
No, I think that's not good enough.
Well, that's not a ghost.
Everybody believes it. That's a big theory, but that's a subject for another show.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, actually, I have been seeing ghosts ever since I was a little girl.
Sure, yeah.
And so they're not frightening to me. I have never run into anyone who was nasty or real negative.
Boy, you're lucky.
I have found many who are confused, many who do not know they're dead.
Well, that's a good. I don't think they are dead, so that's a good explanation for that. That's my opinion. I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Many who do not want to go into the light, and so it's a potpourri of very different reasons why they are still hanging around and why they're still here.
Okay.
And there's a great distinction between those who are here, the consciousness that is here on the earth, versus the consciousness that has gone into the light, which I call spirit. There's a very big difference. So someone who has passed away and gone into the light, and if they come back and speak to me or to show themselves to their loved ones, those are spirits. And the other ones, the consciousnesses who are here stuck on the earthly plane, these are the ghosts.
All right. Well, the Fox sisters could hardly have taken exception, but I think thank you for a wonderful and stimulating conversation today. We're definitely going to have you back. We'll talk about ghosts. Well, hey, anybody could be right on that subject.
Absolutely, we can. We can argue about it till the cows come home.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'd rather say compare ideas. I mean, somebody said there are no really fantastic paranormal investigators, just good possible theories.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
And you know what, Paul? We haven't died yet, so we really don't know.
Let me disagree with that, too. Anyway, love you, kid, and we're going to have you back real soon, and we really appreciate your time, and thank you again for a great conversation. We'll be in touch. Have you back real soon.
Thank you very much, and a Happy New Year.
And to you. Okay, folks. Annette Martin, marvelous person, great psychic from California, of course, where there's a lot more open-mindedness to that sort of thing than there is very often today in New England here, where it's snowing. And we only got a few seconds. Tune in to us tomorrow night on CBS Radio Seattle, Detroit, and Boston, and also newskyradio.com. And our guest will be Sandra Ingerman, expert in the phenomenon of the shaman. We never had a show on that before. It should be pretty interesting. And again, check our website, behindtheparanormal.com. You can buy my books. You can find out about our guests, past and future. And we will see you next week here on WON 1240 AM and onworldwide.com. And our guest will be Father Anthony Perkins, Orthodox priest, to discuss religion and the paranormal. See you then.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.